New episodes of Tour Talk go live every Monday, so please subscribe, comment, and like if you enjoy what you hear, and help us spread the word by continuing to share this with anyone you think will enjoy. This is Tour Talk.
Hello.
Hello. How are you? Tell me about you.
I'm good, man. There's just stuff happening, you know.
Uh-huh.
I'm waiting just for specific dates to come in, and we'll have a lot of work to do. I just went and rehearsed for 4 hours today, and I got to do that basically every day until forever. So
this might be an interesting place to start then.
Okay.
Because I think so far we've had a lot of fun and we've talked about. It's all been a lot of tour jokes and what happens on the road, and there's been a lot of fun, and there's been some serious stuff too. But I think there's a whole kind of mental aspect to being either a working musician who works on the road or as a songwriter that envelops a lot of ups and downs.
Okay.
There's a lot of good stuff and there's a lot of downs, and that's an interesting place to be in terms of motivating yourself to rehearse, to get stuff right without actually having anything in the book. And I know that's kind of essentially what the pandemic has been about. It's keep pushing yourself to be ready for when stuff is open. But now that things are open, how is it dealing with the still not quite knowing, the still motivating yourself to get the most out of it and riding the waves of what kind of comes with that? Because we could get into maybe a little bit about what it's like when you've got shows pending that you've maybe been submitted for a tour that you would really like, and you've got an idea of how you want to do it in your mind, but all of these things are hypothetical, and that's a bit of a ride to go on.
Right. So I think it's not much different from this could be for someone who's just starting out and booking their own shows, like a younger musician or band, a newer act. Or this is for anybody in this time period. The process never really changes. It's when you're a young band starting out and you're booking your own shows, you're just sending out emails and phone calls, and you're scratching for everything you can get, and you never know. The response might be, yeah, next Tuesday, come to the pub and play a show. And so what do you do when that happens? And it's no different. It's the same thing when you're a young band and you're just in the garage and you're writing songs and you're like, this is great, this is fun, we have a set down, and you're rehearsing the set. And what are you rehearsing the set for? You're rehearsing the set for live shows. And or you're working for a record, you're trying to put songs together for a record. But same thing. You're always trying to perform those songs, whether it's in the studio or live. And obviously, the more you rehearse, the better. So you're never really and maybe some bands do, but I've never been this way as a musician. I always want to be ready. I want to be ready. This comes from spending years scrapping for shows and spending years booking your own shows and scrapping and just trying to get any opportunity to play. There is no downtime and then you can chill and then rehearse and get sharpened up for the tour. That's not how it works. You have to be ready every day. And I've carried this mindset over that just because I'm a new artist again, if a booking agent calls and says, hey, there's a show next Tuesday here, I'm ready. I'm not waiting.
So you are the only given to be is that you're ready for the show. You have no idea when the show might be.
I don't care.
Or how many of them might be or where they might be. The only thing
care.
is that you're going to be ready. That's how you approach it.
Correct. And I think you know this from how I approached the pandemic. It was the same thing. I worked at it every single day. I sang every day. I wrote songs every day. And I'm still doing the same thing every day. And it's not that I can't take a day off here or there. And I have a life outside of, not much of one, but I do have some semblance of a life outside of music. And I just don't really take time off. I think about it I always think until I'm not the star player on the team, and I never have been. I've always been on the bench and in the dugout waiting to get called up. And so for me, now that I'm in this new position where I'm also, again, I'm not calling to make the shows happen myself, but my agent and manager are constantly working now to get these new opportunities. And now that the world was completely on pause and now the world's opened up.
Yep.
So shows are getting booked. So everybody wants to play. It's just a matter of what gets booked and what doesn't. And I have a great team, and they're getting they're making a lot of progress and getting a lot of stuff done. And for me, it's mentally difficult because you want to play and you want to be out there. I mean, I know for you too. I mean, you haven't played a live show in years, 2 years at this point or whatever, and it's just the same mentality. It's just being ready. Am I ready? If you call me on Friday and say Monday or Tuesday the tour starts, I'm ready. There's a lot of logistics involved. There's getting transportation and merch and all that other bullshit aside.
But the one thing that's ready is the show.
It has to be, because what else is there? What else do I? What else am I if I'm not the show, right? And
Sure.
I guess I think about it a lot. It's not really. The show is fun. The show shouldn't be the time that you're figuring out what you do.
Mm-hmm.
The show's fun. Like the show
is you just expressing the work
Yeah.
you've done and
Yeah.
preparing for it.
Yeah, so my good buddy John Paul, he plays drums in Clutch, and he always says, and I think a drum teacher told him, and he's always told me that when you're rehearsing from here up. When you're practicing, you practice from the neck up, and when you're playing a show, you're from the neck down, right? Like it's all
Yep.
heart. It's all heart and body, and should be. What do they call it? Muscle memory.
Yeah.
You're doing it, and it should be emotion. But when you're rehearsing, it's not easy to fucking wake up in the morning and be like, all right, I don't have a boss telling me what to do. It's not a company. It's me.
There's a couple of people trying to push you.
Always, yeah, no, and I like to keep people around like you. I like to keep people around that do motivate me and do push me. That's also part of a key to success, is keeping people around you that want you to succeed and want the best for you. But it does suck. Like some mornings I get up and I'm just like, fuck, I do not. It's no different than exercising, right? It's like, and everybody experiences with exercise. That's probably the most common way we can look at this. It's like nobody really wants to do that. Like most people don't wake up and go, man, it would be really fun. Like within the next 30 minutes, go outside and run 2 miles and go to the gym. And
I know some of those maniacs, and they are genuinely insane. But I just want to do it so I don't die early. That's literally, I'm just trying to keep myself
It
healthy
doesn't
enough.
yeah, of course. But it's not about why you do it. It's about the physical act of getting into a routine of discipline. It's self-discipline. So being disciplined enough to make yourself work out, and then the second you're working out, or the second you're rehearsing, for me anyway, the second I have my in-ears in and I'm strumming away and I'm like, oh, this is good. And it's not always I love doing this, but I can recognize while I'm doing it, measuring myself, am I getting better? Can I sing 50 minutes, an hour straight with no hoarseness in my voice? Did I remember all the fucking words that I was supposed to remember? Or did I let myself slide through and bullshit? And what I found was when the pandemic sort of, and I know, all right, people are going to say it's not over, but as the pandemic eased, and in
over in the
America
States, by
especially,
the way.
when shows started popping up again, management and booking said, hey, there's a chance in the next 2 months, no, we don't know, that you're going to have, this was in maybe April or May, June. They said in the next 2 months, you might get some shows. Think about what that's going to be for a 45-minute or half-hour set as a solo artist with an acoustic guitar. I didn't know whether the shows were going to come a week later, a day later, or 2 months later. And then like like clockwork, I got booked to do 10 shows or 8 shows at a 45-minute direct support opening slot for an acoustic artist, this guy Craig Owens. The tour was amazing. He's a great guy. The shows were packed. And before I got that phone call, I had literally spent every single day driving 30 minutes. I live in a very small condo and flat. And I drive 30 minutes to my sound guy, my sound engineer, Dylan Hines. He has a garage that he's converted into a studio. I drive 30 minutes. I set up, I put my in-ears in, and I rehearse the set like it was on stage. And I did that 5 days a week for weeks on end, not knowing when the phone call was going to come that I had those shows. Just knowing that if the phone call comes and when it comes, that I'm fucking really, really ready. And it was the first tour I had ever done in my whole life where the first note of the first set, the first second I was on stage, I was like, I am so glad that I worked those hours preparing for it, because I was so comfortable and I knew every note of every song inside and out. And obviously I made mistakes. People make mistakes. But by the fourth show, I was just like I could do 2 hours up here if I had to, or I rehearsed. I had also never done this before, where I rehearsed a handful of other songs that I wasn't planning on playing, but I had those in the bag too. And I started switching songs in and out of the set, and I knew those as well as I knew the ones I had been playing every night. So it just, the whole thing kind of proved to me that you can never work hard enough to be prepared. You know?
Sure.
You can burn out for sure, and I know that,
So, but is like keeping yourself occupied and working your way of dealing with the unknown? Because there can't be many other jobs in the world, and it's the same for the crew as it is for the artist, that like you don't know when you're next going to be working until it's booked. And the worst thing is there are so many maybes flying around that nobody ever hears about, that you hypothetically talk yourself through of how you're going to do this show or this tour, and we might be going to these places, and you're like, oh shit, I've never been to Argentina before, I'm going to get to go to Argentina, and then the thing doesn't get booked, but you still have to keep your foot on the gas of being ready for the next thing that might get booked. I think it's the mentality of dealing with the unknown that is really kind of unique to what we do in a sense.
Yeah, it's funny. As soon as you said that, I started, this is so, I can't believe I'm sharing this feeling with people, but there's a scene in Game of Thrones. There's a character on the show, Littlefinger, and he's a very bad guy.
He is, yes.
But he says to Sansa Stark, I'll never forget it. He says, I imagine every scenario. I think about every person, and I think about every possible scenario for every person, and I'm never surprised whatever the outcome is.
Yep.
And that to him, the chaos was a ladder. And so I think about it the same way too. I'm certainly not comparing myself to this character. I'm just saying that you can really approach anything like that in life. What it is for me, and this is not a strange feeling for my previous band. It was the same thing. It's that when you're trying to establish yourself as an artist, you are always waiting for the next opportunity, because you're trying to give your career momentum and a trajectory, and each action builds off the next one. And obviously, if you're drawing 500 or 1,000 people a night, your schedule's probably booked out a year in advance, and you kind of know what's happening, and you can dictate your schedule more and say, oh yeah, well in November I'm going to do a 30-day tour because I'm the headliner, but I'm not. I'm the opener, and I'm going to be an opener for a while. And so I just have to be ready, and I have to think about, okay, I've had conversations at this point with some musicians that when I want to go do a full band run, I've already started talking to certain people about what that'll look like and what that'll sound like. And the logistics of that on every angle and what the set would sound like. So for me, it's like you have a lot of hours in the day, I guess, if you fucking think about it. I mean, it's easy for me to not have a lot of hours in the day because I'm like, I'll wake up late and I'll fucking take 2 hours to drink coffee and whatever. But if you really want to squeeze the juice out of a day, you can spend the time thinking about all the possibilities of the potential of the things you want to do. And I think you can apply that to anything.
Yeah, but how do you deal with the potential excitement of getting a tour that you may really, really want, to also then dealing with not getting the tour that you thought that you really wanted, but getting offered something else that you might really, really want, but then not getting that either, and then eventually getting a tour that is really cool too. Like that whole process of the booking thing is a difficult thing to ride out.
Yeah, I think at this point, and I think you could see as we talk, every other day, I've learned to not get too excited about one thing or the other, and just I'm letting it come to me, and I'm trying to not push it through and force it through. Obviously, there's some opportunities where you say, oh, I know a guy who guitar tech for that band, and I know the booking agent's assistant. I was friends with him or her 5 years ago. So you can make little moves, but letting the things kind of happen to you and not, it's kind of like, all right, let's say that I know for next year there's 3 tours that I really want to do these. I know about these 3. I'm submitted for 2 of them, and one of them I'm trying to get onto the radar of submission. I'm not really thinking about those specific tours. I'm thinking about what I can do to be ready for them.
So you're not getting lost in the multiverse of options, because it is very easy to do that and get excited by it.
Yeah, and I do get excited. I'm excited in general, I guess, is the theme. You know what I mean? Like I'm excited in general that these opportunities are coming and they're happening, and whatever the level is. And not every tour, not every show or tour is measured by ticket sales or money.
No.
Sometimes it's truly the opportunity of doing it, or where that tour will lead you, or the 5 people you meet on that tour that change your universe forever, or the one fan in that one town that spends the next year before you can come back telling all their friends about you. You don't know. So I am excited in general about the movement of things, and I really try to stay in the middle about, like, this tour. I used to be very, very, very in the mentality of this tour or this show will change everything.
This is not the one that's going to break it.
Never. It's never the truth, and you only know it. You only can look back and see what worked and what didn't. You can never
slow grind. It's slow accumulation of.
You can't.
There's one fans in every town, and then they bring another guy.
That's it. And you can't look at it like this is the show that's make or break, because it never is. It's a series of things connected to each other. It's like anything else. It's like it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, whatever your job is, one shit day on the job doesn't decide your entire career. It's only looking back at your choices and decisions and making smart choices and smart decisions over a long period of time shape your career. Granted, one thing can push you forward, but then think about the hundreds of viral musicians or artists that have gone viral. 1 out of every 100 has a sustaining career. I mean, even these people who did American Idol or The Voice or whatever, they're in front of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, Eurovision, all that.
Yep.
And they're a flash in the pan, because I would imagine a lot of those people think in their heads, I made it. There is no making it. It's just going.
That's it. It's just keep going until you're not going anymore, and then that's it.
I mean, yeah. And a lot of people in this industry, especially, when they get to a place of 1,000 tickets a night and tour buses and luxury, something changes in them, and they're very unwilling to backtrack. And sometimes, on a lot of journeys in life, you have to backtrack to continue forward. And that's just like a fact. This is just something, now that I'm 38, this is something that I like know. It's not something when you're 18 you understand. It's only down the line that you look back and you go, yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to fucking backtrack. You have to go back to the source of like why you're doing this. And sometimes that means, you know, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, like, you know, Dan Reed and Danny Vaughn, you basically set up a tour, which was my first solo shows ever. And doing that tour meant literally sleeping in a minivan.
Yep.
And eating like basically canned food and being as tight as I could on a budget and starting over with a very small guarantee but a very big opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's just about sometimes you have to do those things to keep going forward, and there's no way to know it. So I think that comes back to what we were talking about before. It's just always be ready.
Okay. Perfect. So let's flip it to working creatively then, because obviously being a songwriter, musician, you're creating stuff quite regularly. And when I manage bands, it's all about ideas for the next concept, whether it be with the record and artwork or merch or music videos or a release schedule or how to engage people. And that is a very up and down kind of spectrum to be on, even with the podcast and stuff of trying to keep finding ways to innovate with it and keep ourselves and people listening interested. Like it's difficult. I mean, especially as a songwriter, I can imagine that isn't just a tap you can turn on. And
there's months where there's nothing to work with, and that's probably the hardest to control emotionally, is like feeling like you have nothing to say or you have no.
Because ultimately, that's your one job, isn't it? To write the songs and then play them.
Yeah, I'm sure I could find other people to write songs with or to write them for me, but at the end of the day,
it's what you want to do, though. That's what you love doing.
I love it. I love the feeling of a song kind of appears out of thin air, you know. And then a lot of times, the thing is with that though is it's not magic. It's like it's the same thing as rehearsing for the tour. It's like every day you have to kind of sit down. And even if you just noodle for 30 minutes and you have like a half of a bad idea, that's still better than no idea. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times once the floodgate opens, you'll go weeks without coming up with something, and then a week solid where you have 8 ideas that you think are good. And then you revisit those ideas in a couple months and they're not all as good as you thought they were, but there's 3 things that worked. And it's this like cycle. It never ends. It's just like, all right, this month I write songs. This month I have nothing. This week is good this week, you know. And it goes back to the beginning of the discussion, is it just staying in the middle is probably the most helpful thing to do. When you write a great song, don't get too excited, because you got to write another one, and hopefully you got to write 100 more.
Can you handle being in the middle when it's not working for you?
It's tough, man. It is tough. I'm an emotional person.
Yeah.
My lows are low and my highs are high. Mm-hmm. And it is tough.
So where does the motivation come from then? From an actual love of just knowing that you love doing it, one day it will come back, or?
Yeah, I guess that's part of like, that's like a deeper psychological discussion, I guess. But I love being like, I guess I love being an underdog, essentially, even to my own psyche. I love the challenge, the thought of being like, this fucking guy is so stupid, or, you know, this guy can't write songs, or this guy, you know, what's he doing? He's starting his music career over at, you know, 37, 30. Mm-hmm. It's crazy, but I love that. I love the fact that, you know, and for myself too, I go, fuck, well, you haven't written a good song in 30 days. Like, maybe you should keep trying to write a good song so that you have more good songs and you're not a person who wrote a batch of songs and then can't write another. But I think it's also important too to have the discipline to like sit down and try it, but you can't force it. Like,
no, you can't flog yourself. It's brutal.
Yeah, it's going to come or it's not.
Yeah, especially when you're like sat there just like self like flagellating yourself and like giving yourself a hard time, because there are days, and this is what people probably don't really understand. It's probably the same with singing as is playing guitar or anything else. That I've been playing guitar 20 years. I know I can play guitar, but there are some days I'll sit down to improvise and it'll just be shit. And I'll be playing the same notes that I would normally play, but it doesn't matter. It just doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel good, and you can get lost in that little cycle of why can't I play anymore? Why doesn't this make sense right now? And I could come
Yeah.
back a day later and feel like it's the best I've ever played.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, maybe you feel differently about this, but I kind of also think it's better to be hard on yourself, though, than to be patting yourself on the back, because I don't think good stuff really comes from the pat.
I mean, you're allowed to enjoy those moments where like you're enjoying it, because they are few and far between. I think the thing about being a musician is that like it's 99% miserable, and not quite doing exactly what you want to do, and then that 1% where things click.
I think it's good to recognize when when you kill, when you have a great show or when it worked. But it's really important, I think, for both things, but especially killing. It's really important to recognize it and be like, recognize why and how it worked, and then immediately move on. And it's almost better to be like, it's almost better to think about the things that you fucked up more than what you got right, because your whole job was to get it right. So big fucking deal, but you can't, the more you let yourself slide with mistakes, the more complacent you become.
Sure.
The same way as if you congratulating all the time and you're like, I'm so great. And
It's not about them maybe so great. It's literally just feeling comfortable doing what you're doing for that moment, because so much of it can feel uncomfortable, and not understanding why you've committed so much time to a thing and you still can't quite get those little nuances right. So that when you get those moments, to just enjoy them and make the most of them. I mean, fortunately for me, I was always in a band with somebody who ripped on guitar, and 9 nights out of 10 would shit all over me. And then all I ever have to do to ground myself is stick a Marcus King video on or something like that. And then it's
right.
No matter how good you think you are in that moment, it's like, oh, wow, yeah, all these guys can actually rip. And everybody plays different, and that's the other side of it. Reminding yourself that like you can't be like all these other people. You are just you, and you just play how you play, and that's great too.
Right. But to play devil's advocate, because I do think there's a flip side to that, is that like, go pull up Aretha Franklin in the 60s and 70s on YouTube, and then realize that you have a lot of work. As good as a singer as you think you are, you have a lot of work to do. And it's not about being as good as Aretha Franklin.
Or not being the same. It's not about being the same as her.
It's about having the same reaction, right? Because like, she's a great she's maybe the best vocalist of all time, and she's her. The people are feeling, in the audience are feeling something because it's her, and the vocal performance is great. If you go up and also have that same level of dedication and intensity, and you are 100% authentic, I also think it's better to hold yourself to that standard than to think that you're anything like special. I mean, this is me anyway. I love watching old performances like that and being like, man, the PA was terrible. The microphone was terrible. The monitor situation was terrible. And they destroy. And I also think that, to come full circle, I also think it's because most of the singers that I love came out of like gospel, and they're singing hours a day every day. There is no there's church service Wednesday, 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. And that's a lot of shows.
Yep.
So you got to be ready. I mean, I don't see another.
Are you going to start practicing in church?
Oh, I would get destroyed in a church. I can't. I mean, I've been in churches. I've seen quite a few gospel bands, especially in DC, and I would say that that's probably like, if you want to go feel totally bad about where you are as a performer, go watch any gospel church in any church in America on a Sunday, and go watch a gospel band play, and you realize your chops ain't shit at all. Guitar, bass, drums, keys, vocals. That's it. Like, and their audience is oftentimes small, and the pay is pretty good. I know a couple guys who play for gospel services on Sunday, Baptist services, and
I thought they all did it for free.
no, they're paid musicians for sure. The pay's good, but they're also vastly superior to most average musicians in anywhere.
So moving it into actual touring, because I was really lucky that when I got into the touring world, I did it through STS, and I basically just toured with a lot of great people. Like, not in terms of great at what they do, they were also good at that, but like just really good people who were nice to be around, who like were positive about what they did, enjoyed being around each other, and there was just a great vibe all the time. And it took me years, I didn't even really realize it was happening, to end up working in an environment where the atmosphere was quite negative, and it totally changed the mentality of touring for me and being on the road. And I don't know whether you've experienced the same thing, but for me it was when I started working in America, and the crew especially had this totally different mindset of just being negative on themselves. There was this whole we're roadie pieces of shit kind of thing, and like in a self-congratulatory way, but also like putting themselves down at the same time. And it was a totally like new environment for me, and I didn't really understand or get it, and it made it much harder for me to handle being on tour, because it's not the easiest thing at the best of times. And I'd always try to be positive and put my best foot forward and take like pride in what I did, and being where we were, and then coming across that kind of attitude and environment on the road was really hard.
Yeah, it's hard for me to speak on it. I think for the most part that like our country does not value art and art and production the same way that the rest of the world does, frankly. So like, we coined the term like roadie. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It's very strange. It's a very strange concept to have a working class blue collar job and have it be like negative. I think that's a big generalization. I don't think like all Americans feel that way.
No, and that's not what I'm saying at all. But that was the first time I'd really kind of encountered it.
I just think like it's just, I don't know. Maybe, I can't. I don't know what that is. I don't know.
So, but the main point that I was trying to get into is more about it's such, especially probably as a musician, where the show basically affects your mood greatly after it. Like, it's a difficult place to be anyway for 6 weeks. Going out, putting yourself on stage, selling yourself every night, or selling what you're trying to do every night, and getting across to people. To then like be in a negative environment whilst you're on the road, like, how does that affect like your mental state of
every scenario is different, right? So yeah, I would never want to be in a negative. It's terrible. Like it's terrible. Being on a tour where there's a negative vibe it's hard enough as it is to, everyone's away from home. Everyone's scraping by on money, and then to have to have negativity, it's a cancer, it's and I'm sure it's a tour to tour, band to band, year to year thing. It's a unique situation. So I think it's really important to surround yourself, like I said before, with people that are mentally and physically positive people.
Because it's something that, a few of the guests have brought up on the show, where they've been around a bad vibe, and we've never really kind of dug into it. But it is a great time on tour. It should be this, we're out exploring the world and trying to, bring a show to people and create this whole thing. Yet sometimes there can be a vibe or a negative vibe with it.
I've been on tours where the opening for the headliner, the headliner's not happy to have you for whatever reason. It's a bad vibe, or they're having their own internal problems. It's a bad vibe. I've been on tours where specific people in my tour were not having a good time, and it spreads. I've been on tours where you get to a venue and the venue is they're totally dicks, or the crowd's hostile. I think it's like any other work environment, except everything's amplified, right? Because you don't get to go home at the end of the night and decompress. You got to go sit in the same fucking room as these people, or the impending doom is the next day you have to go be on the tour that's bad if the headliner's bad, or so it's quite brutal. I mean, it's.
Have you learned to find a way to middle that, like you have with everything else?
It's hard though, because it's everything on tour is amplified. So if it's fun, it's the most fun you'll have. It's the most fun experience I think that a musician can have.
Mm-hmm.
Way more fun than being in the studio. Way more fun than, it's the best.
Yep.
And when it's bad, it's very bad. And then I think there's people who want to be on tour and there's people who don't. And there's people that don't want to be on tour that essentially at certain points in their career have to tour or do tour. They choose to tour. And, it's not a good place to be if you don't really want to be there. And that's for any job, but I feel like I've had a lot of other jobs where it's very fucking clear that I didn't want to be there, but I could... You
could do your 8 hours and get through it and go home. And
yeah, you push through it and then you come home. And, or, it's like work, I've worked at a ton of like bars and stuff, and it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is fucking miserable. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is good. It's not much different on tour, It's the same. That's the same thing. It's just it's a lot harder to push through because it's in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 week stretches. So
now moving forward, how important is it for you finding people that you want to be around for that length of time, and that
everything
more than what they can play? Or
yes, there's 1,000 guitar players. There's 1 million guitar players, and out of the 1 million, there's 1,000 that are fucking unbelievably good. And out of the 1,000, there's probably 10 that you want to spend time with. So it's really you're making the decision,
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think to me, and maybe there's people like, an artist like Prince. The vibe, the personal, your attitude probably, your personal vibe probably had nothing to do with you getting the job or not. Are you the baddest person? Are you the best at what you do?
Sure.
Can you play the part better than everyone? And do you show up on time and do it? And that's probably the end of the story.
Because he's not spending time with everyone because he tours in a totally different way to everyone else?
Yeah, I would imagine it's mostly like a completely business relationship, but I think for me anyway, it's much more like I think the offstage energy translates to onstage big time.
Yeah.
For me big time. So yeah, and I've been on tours where the vibe is so good that the shows are better. Everyone plays better. I mean, you saw a bunch of them where like the spirit was so good that it was unstoppable. Like the energy was palpable, and then it came onto the stage, and then the crowd felt it.
Yep.
And then it was like, all right, like this is what we're here to do. So I think for me, in general, staying in a place where you're happy about everything that's good. I mean, that's...
How often is it better, more often than it is worse, do you think?
Yeah.
Is it 50-50 or?
No, I wouldn't do it if it was more worse than good.
Yeah.
And I think most people end up not doing it.
I agree.
If they feel that way. No, it's mostly good. It's like everything else. It's stuff is mostly good if you want it to be. If you choose to look at it like that, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because even with a bad show, if there's if there's 30 shows and 5 of them are bad, and that's a pretty high number.
What do you mean by bad? Bad musically? Bad
You play
experience
bad.
of the day? Or
The crowd was bad. You had a bad day. You got a flat tire. All the shit that's involved in it. You know, dinner sucked. Whatever. Like, you know those nights where you're like, oh god, the promoter fed us like literally dog food, and
all the other band's leftovers.
Yeah. I've told that story on the podcast. Like, a promoter literally fed us food that they scraped off another band's plate. So, I think if you have 10 out of 30 of those nights, you still have 20 great nights. That's great. That's a very successful tour to me.
Anything you want to ask me?
Yeah. How do you push through? How do you push through? Like, just with, all right. So like we've talked about, we've had a podcast with your old band, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the last time you really made a real push musically to like be a part of a band. Sure. And then you got into more of the logistical side of touring. And then that went really well for you. And then the pandemic happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like, now it's like multiple years of not only not playing shows, but then when stuff was going really good for you on a managerial and logistical aspect of things on the other side of the table, and then all of a sudden there's nothing.
I think I got to a point where I like and trust the people that I'm working with the majority of the time. I think there was a point where I was really busy and I was working for a lot of people and I didn't enjoy all of it. Whereas now that the projects I'm working on with Dan and stuff, like, I genuinely believe in them. Like, I think they're really cool. I really like the new record. I think the way they're planning on releasing like video media is going to be really cool. So I really enjoy being a part of that. Like, it's taken a lot of time to get round to getting it released, which has been frustrating. But because I actually really like it, then I can suck it up until we can finally get to that point of doing it again. And it's the same for me with stuff that might be happening with you in the future, or a couple of other people that I may work with, that, like, because I'm actually looking forward to doing it, the short-term pain of all of it, eventually that will go away. And eventually,
I agree.
I know when I get back to doing those things specifically, that they're genuinely things that I enjoy doing with people that I enjoy being around. And it will be, that's the best way I can imagine enjoying, like, spending my time. So I think it's that knowledge of weeding out the stuff that I don't like, which takes time, because you say yes to a lot of stuff in this industry, because it's how you get your foot on the ladder. And it's, you know, you're saying yes to so much stuff all the time that you don't even really have time to digest whether you're enjoying it or not. And then all of a sudden, 6 months down the line, like, yeah, oh shit, am I miserable? Like, am I not enjoying this? Why am I apprehensive about going on this tour? Like, oh God, do I actually like being around these people? That kind of thing. Whereas, at least moving forward, I've tried to scale it back and just try and work with people that I like and trust, and they're equally weighted, because trust is a very hard thing in this industry too.
Yeah, it sucks.
And it never. I think it's the same in life. That never ceases to amaze you what people will do. And, you know, I may have been guilty of some of those things at points in my life too, but, like, especially, like, working in the music industry, like, if you can trust a couple of people to rely on and you enjoy working with them, then that's way better than working for 100 people and just working all the time. So,
yeah,
for me, yeah, that's pretty much it.
I think that's also a takeaway is you have to do all the shit stuff to figure out if you like it, and B, if this is what you want to do. And then you figure you can't do the cool stuff until you've done the shit stuff. And that's a fact.
I got lucky that, like I said, because I worked with really good people out the gate, I just thought it was all great. and I was just going to have a great time doing all of it, and there were always going to be people looking out for me and people treating me like with respect all the time and stuff. And turns out that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
And until you get hit with that, you know, you don't really realize or appreciate what it means to work with the people that you do like and you do like spending time with. So therefore, that was my takeaway from that whole situation anyway. It might
That's
take me
awesome.
another year on top of that to figure that out. But now I know.
No, I think about your situation often, and I also, people have this really weird thing, right? Where like, they look at the music industry as like, you're either an artist or you're not, right? And like, I think a lot of people have that mindset where they're like you started out as a guitar player.
Yep.
And then you were in a band, and 99% of the time, to me, what happens is people get to that point, it doesn't work, and then they go work at a bank.
Yeah.
Or they go work at, they give up. So I think it's also really cool for people who listen to this, to me, for people who listen to this that are like, not similar to you, but even getting into it, or you're like, oh, I want to be a part of the music industry. It's like, that can mean a million different things, and I think it's awesome to stay within it, because being around it, to me, at the end of the day, I've always known this and felt this or whatever. Like, if I couldn't do what I'm doing now, I would be doing something to be around music, because at the end of the day, like, that's what it is, you know?
I think people on the outside assume that the only creative people involved are the people on stage.
They're the least creative. They're the least creative.
They're literally just plagiarizing everybody who's come before them.
Yeah.
What I learned really quickly, especially with my own band, is that like merch needs designing, artwork needs creating, even logistics around getting from A to B to C has to be pretty creative at times. Like, and I like being creative across the board, and it never was just on writing songs or playing guitar, but like I really liked all those other aspects. And then it's we're going to shoot a music video. What's the premise for it? What's the idea? What's it going to look like? Where are we going to shoot it? Who's going to shoot it?
Right.
How do we get people interested in this release that's coming up? And I think that's why the management side of stuff, part of it anyway, really appealed to me, and especially doing it for something that I love, which is bands and music and live music. That like it all just knitted together really nicely for me, and that's the reason I wanted to stay around it, is because it had always been about that, doing something in the music. I mean, I never thought I'd actually be a guitar player in a band when I was like 15 or 16. I was fucking terrible.
Right.
Like, so I never thought I would actually get to that point, and like I managed to plug away at it until we had some semblance of success and had a lot of fun doing it. But then there's this whole other world. I mean, like set design and production, and like you have no idea what goes on until you get into it. And I mean, obviously you've been working with Dylan on figuring out this in-ear thing, and like that's way just as creative as
it's crazy.
Any of the other shit that goes on.
He is a sound designer. I mean, it's really crazy. And I think back to doing Warped Tour, and we had this guy. He was training to be a driver, a bus driver. And I think, going back to your conversation, the topic before about like I think that people do have a negative connotation about these positions on a tour, right? Yeah. They look down on them, especially in America. That guy was a drummer in a rock band that toured all over the world. And they weren't famous. They were just a mid-level band that toured everywhere. Mm-hmm. And the band came to an end, and he didn't know what to do. And now he drives tour buses and makes like, a few $100 to $500 a day driving a goddamn tour bus. And he gets to travel, and he gets to see the shows and be a part of it, and like he's part of the thing that makes the shows happen. So there's a sense of pride to it, and like it's just really interesting how you can stay a part of the business and not do the thing that you started doing.
It's got to be pretty unique in that way, because pretty much anybody who works for a band plays something.
Right.
or has played something, or has like
Right.
had has a little cover band on the side or something, or
Right.
has been like I've been on buses where the driver's like a fully fledged audio engineer, and he's just ended up like that's where he's kind of fallen, that he's got the most work driving buses, but like that guy can run a desk if needs be.
Right.
It's like, oh shit,
Both my manager and booking agent were in bands at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't remember how we got here, but that's literally that's the.
Well,
I
think the idea of where we ended up in this conversation is about the overall idea of like just working, just being prepared, and just being around, being a part of it, and like making yourself do something every day that keeps you in the orbit of music. I don't know. I have nothing left.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah.
when the vibe's right and the people are great and the songs are
fun.
good. It is. I always love talking to you. You know it's good fun.
Babe. You're sweet.
All right, cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Tour Talk. We'll see you next time.
Congratulations on making it to the end of another episode of Tour Talk. You can keep up to date with us across the socials at Tour Talk Pod, so that's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Patreon. Please subscribe, comment, like, and share, and we will see you next week.